Two prospectors hired to find diamonds in Labrador found nickel instead, and Inco paid $4.3 billion for it. Chuck Fipke spent 10 summers walking 600 kilometers backwards along a trail of garnet grains you would need a laboratory to identify. In Malartic, Quebec, a gold company lifted 138 houses off their foundations and moved them to dig underneath. However, none of that happened because the Canadian Shield is old. The rock under your own house holds the same metals, and nothing there was ever violent enough to gather them. Let's dive in. Start with the number that makes the rest of this make sense. Average continental crust contains gold at about 1.3 parts per billion. That is the Royal Society of Chemistry figure, and published estimates vary, but parts per billion is the correct unit for it. At that concentration, you would have to put roughly 24,000 tons of ordinary rock through a mill to recover 1 ounce. Your local crust is not short of gold. It has nickel, uranium, and lithium too, spread so evenly that touching any of it is pointless. An ore deposit is what happens when something interrupts that evenness. Something has to melt, or collide, or pump fluid through a crack for 10 million years. Then, nothing can come along afterwards and put the rock back. What follows is a run of places on the Canadian Shield where that happened. Every one is measured in a different unit. And the unit is how you will know one story has ended and the next has started. The first unit is percent. Go to the coast of northern Labrador, about 35 kilometers from the Inuit community of Nain. In 1993, two prospectors, Albert Chislett and Chris Verbisky, were working there through their own company, Archean Resources, under contract to Diamond Fields Resources. They were looking for diamonds. What they came back with was a rust-colored showing on top of a nickel, copper, and cobalt body Inco would later pay billions for. The word the geologist Ryan used for it in Economic Geology, writing in 2000, is serendipitously. Here is what percent means at Voisey's Bay. Vale's technical report, effective the 31st of December, 2025, puts the proven and probable reserve at 28.5 million tons. It grades 1.77% nickel, 0.8% copper, and 0.11% cobalt. 1.77% means that out of every 100 tons of rock, nearly 2 tons are nickel metal. Now the part that explains that grade, and it is not the part most people expect. The metal did not settle out of a magma chamber. Vale says so in its own filing. The sulfides are not derived through gravity settling, but occur through multiple pulses of sulfide-bearing magma. Evans-Lamswood and colleagues describe sulfide distribution controlled by emplacement through multiple braids of a dynamic, channel-like conduit system. Translated, that is a pipe. Molten rock was forced up a narrow throat in the crust, over and over, and where the throat pinched, the heavy sulfide stopped moving while the rest kept going. The ore is what got stuck in the plumbing. The rock it got stuck in is a troctolite dated to 1,334 million years, part of the Nain Plutonic Suite. Ryan calls that a stitching batholith, injected across the join between two older provinces and welding them together. The sulfur appears to have come from the crust the magma melted on its way through, which is still argued about. The Archean basement under Nain is among the oldest crust on the continent, and the ore body is more than 1 billion years younger than the ground it sits in. Age did not make it. What happened next at Voisey's Bay is the reason this deposit belongs on this list, rather than a different one. In January of 1997, Canada, Newfoundland, and Labrador, the Labrador Inuit Association, and the Innu Nation signed a memorandum creating a joint environmental review panel. The two nations were signatories to the process, not people invited to comment on it. Samuel Metcalfe, who was born in Nain, sat on the 5-member panel. The panel reported in March of 1999, and 2 of its recommendations matter. Recommendation 5. Canada and the province issue no project authorizations until the Labrador Inuit Association and the Innu Nation have each concluded impact benefit agreements with the company. An earlier recommendation bars authorizing construction until land claims agreements in principle have been concluded. That is a federal-provincial panel telling two governments they may not permit a mine until two indigenous nations have signed. The waiting had a price, and Inco paid it. In the second quarter of 2002, it wrote the project's carrying value down by $1.552 billion. 6 weeks later, on the 29th of July, 2002, the impacts and benefits agreements were signed. The Labrador Inuit Land Claims Agreement was not signed until the 22nd of January, 2005. The company reached its deal with the nations more than 2 years before the Crown did. The panel also recorded that some Aboriginal people felt they could not support the project under any circumstances. This was not unanimous, and nobody involved pretended it was. The price is worth saying out loud. Inco bought the Voisey's Bay deposits in 1996 for about $4.3 billion on Memorial University's account of the sale. Inco's own books corroborate the scale. It was still carrying the project at $3.753 billion American dollars in 2002. 1.77% nickel, and a mine that could not be permitted until the people whose land it was had signed. Now the unit changes, and it stops being a percent and becomes a multiple. The Athabasca Basin in northern Saskatchewan holds uranium at grades that do not really have a comparison anywhere else. Cameco's reserve statement, effective the 31st of December 2025, puts Cigar Lake at 16.33% uranium oxide. Cameco's own wording for it is the world's highest grade uranium mine. The multiple is where this uranium claim gets difficult, and I will say why rather than hand you a clean figure. No agency publishes a world average uranium ore grade. Not the International Atomic Energy Agency, not the Nuclear Energy Agency, not Natural Resources Canada. What the World Nuclear Association publishes is a floor. Most deposits currently supporting the world's mines run above 0.1% uranium, and some are worked down to 0.02. Convert that floor into the oxide figure Cameco reports, and it lands a little under 0.12%. Set Cigar Lake against that, and the multiple is 138. Cameco has used the round figure of 100 times the world average, and for Cigar Lake, that is conservative. One caution, because this number is widely misquoted. McArthur River is the larger mine and not the richer one. Its reserve grade is 6.48%, not 16, and the 100-fold claim no longer belongs to it. Here is what makes uranium grades like that possible. There is a surface in that basin where sandstone lies directly on much older basement rock. Patrick Alexandre and colleagues in Mineralium Deposita date the basin's formation to about 1.75 billion years ago and the uranium itself to about 1.59 billion. For that stretch, two fluids were circulating. Salty oxidized brine moved down through the sandstone carrying uranium in solution. Reduced fluid moved up out of the fractured basement. Where they met, at the unconformity, the uranium came out of solution and stopped. Not a single event. A plumbing system the size of a basin, running for tens of millions of years, dropping metal at one horizon. The consequence of that grade is that Cigar Lake cannot be mined the way mines are normally mined. Cameco's technical report calls the jet boring system a non-entry method, chosen because of groundwater, weak rock, and radiation protection. The ground is frozen solid from the surface first. High-pressure water jets then cut cavities in the frozen ore from a tunnel in barren basement rock underneath, and it comes out as a slurry. Nobody goes near the ore body. It is too radioactive to stand in front of. If you have ever driven across northern Ontario or northern Quebec and wondered why the rock beside the road is bare and pink and refuses to turn into anything, subscribe. The rest of this video is about what people have done with that rock. And put your province in the comments. I want to see how much of this audience is standing on the shield right now. It has not been a smooth year either. Flooding collapsed the Smoothstone River Bridge in northern Saskatchewan on the 5th of May 2026. Cameco announced the halt on the 10th, and production resumed on the 27th. Cigar Lake stopped again on the 1st of July when the sulfuric acid plant failed at Orano's McLean Lake Mill, the third-party operation that processes its ore. It restarted on the 15th. 2 deposits in, and neither one is rich because the rock is old. By the end, that will be the only thing every deposit here has in common. 138 times the floor, from a mine no worker can enter. The unit changes again to carats. A carat is 1/5 of a gram, and the word comes from a carob seed. That is the precision this one is bought and sold at. In 1981, Chuck Fipke and Stuart Blusson started working together. Blusson was a Geological Survey of Canada mapper with a Berkeley doctorate. Fipke ran a mineral laboratory in Kelowna. Superior Oil paid for the early years and also funded John Gurney's garnet chemistry work in Cape Town, which is the science it all runs on. Then Superior quit and handed the two of them the ground. De Beers was never a backer, it was the competitor, sampling the same country. Now the correction, because almost every version of the diamond story gets it backwards, including the version I would have told you. People assume the ice sheet scraped the shield bare and left the diamond pipes lying in the open. It did the opposite. Kimberlite is soft. It weathers into hollows. The hollows fill with water, and the pipes disappear. At Diavik, the 4 economic pipes sit underneath Lac de Grasse, beneath several meters of glacial till, a layer of lake sediment, and 15 to 20 meters of water. You could stand on top of one of the great diamond deposits on Earth and see a lake. What the ice actually did was steal the evidence and scatter it. As the sheet ground over the pipes, it tore out the hard minerals inside and smeared them west. The Geological Survey traces that fan at least 180 kilometers down ice from Lac de Grasse through 3 separate flow directions. So the deposit was hidden, and its fingerprint dragged across half a territory. Fipke and Blusson walked the fingerprint. 600 kilometers up ice against the flow over 10 summers, from around Blackwater Lake toward Lac de Grasse. What they were counting were garnets of a particular chemistry, the class geologists call G10. A G10 garnet is low in calcium and high in chromium, and it comes from Harzburgite, a mantle rock that has already had most of itself melted out. It does not prove there are diamonds below it. What it proves is that the pipe reached into the exact kind of mantle rock diamonds live in. Around 85% of the garnets found trapped inside diamonds worldwide look like that one. The discovery hole was collared at Point Lake in September of 1991 and hit kimberlite at 137 meters. A 59 kilogram sample of that core gave up 81 diamonds. And now the reason the diamonds are down there at all, and it has nothing to do with Canada. Diamond is only stable below about 150 kilometers down. Above that depth, carbon prefers to be graphite. Stephen Shirey and colleagues put the requirement at pressures near 50,000 atmospheres and temperatures between roughly 950 and 1400 degrees. So to have diamonds, you need continental root that reaches that deep and stays cold. Under the slave craton, the lithospheric keel runs between 200 and 250 kilometers thick, depending on whether you measure with seismic waves, electrical resistance, or mantle fragments. Now set that against ordinary seafloor, because the comparison is the whole argument. Under an ocean, the same layer reaches only about 100 kilometers. That is shallower than the diamond threshold. Most of this planet has no root deep enough to make one, and that is the entire explanation. A geologist named Clifford noticed that pattern in 1966 without knowing the mechanism, and the rule still holds. Some of the diamonds date to 3.5 billion years. The kimberlites that carried them up run about 55 million at Diavik and 53 at the Panda Pipe, in a field spanning roughly 45 to 75 million. Those are more than 60 times older than the eruption that brought them up. and the ride was fast. Kimberlite ascends at tens of meters a second and reaches the surface in under a day, which is the only reason the cargo survives. Slower, and they turn to graphite on the way. At the Panda Pipe, the eruption buried Eocene wood 300 meters down, and it is still wood. Diavik produced over 150 million carats. Akati produced over 100 million. Both are finished. Diavik ran its final day of production on the 26th of March, 2026, after 23 years. Two of Akati's subsidiaries, Arctic Canadian Diamond Company and Burgundy Diamonds Canada, obtained creditor protection on the 1st of May, 2026. The operation went into receivership on the 14th of July. 140 parties were approached and no compliant bid arrived. Mining stopped in the middle of August. Point Lake, the pipe that started all of it, reached first ore in the last quarter of 2024, 33 years after the discovery hole. It ramped through the first half of 2025, stopped on the 16th of July, and went on to care and maintenance as sub-economic. Its owner was in receivership inside a year. More than 250 million carats, out of holes nobody could see. Now troy ounces, and this is where the arithmetic from the beginning comes back. A troy ounce is 31.1 grams. Hold the crustal figure next to a real ore body. Ordinary crust at 1.3 parts per billion means about 24,000 tons of rock for 1 ounce. Macassa in Kirkland Lake runs at 8.84 grams a ton, so 3.5 tons of that gets you the same ounce, nearly 7,000-fold. All of that ground is one belt. The Abitibi runs across the Ontario-Quebec border, and Thomas Monecke and colleagues put its orogenic gold endowment above 6,200 tons, which is roughly 200 million ounces. Richard Goldfarb and colleagues put the total for every Precambrian shield on Earth at 23 to 25,000 tons. One belt on one provincial border holds about a quarter of it. The mechanism here is neither an impact nor a magma pipe. It is a mountain range wringing itself out. During the late stages of a collision, hot fluid loaded with carbon dioxide is driven up crustal scale faults, powered, Goldfarb's group is specific, by pressure swings during earthquakes. In the Abitibi, those faults have names: the Porcupine Destor break and the Larder Lake Cadillac break. Gold drops out in the smaller splays off them, where the fluid hits a bend and the pressure falls. The town of Malartic sits on the Cadillac break. It was constituted in 1939. It held nearly 7,000 people in the 50s, and at the last census, it held 3,355. Osisko did not discover anything there. It bought an old property out of a bankruptcy in late 2004 and worked out that at modern scale you could mine grades nobody had bothered with. The open pit that displaced the town ran at 0.77 grams a ton, 40 tons of rock per ounce. The way you make that pay is volume, about 55,000 tons of ore a day, plus 220,000 tons of waste rock. The ore body was under the south end of the town. Quebec's Public Hearings Bureau recorded exactly what moved: 205 residential buildings and 5 institutional buildings, being 2 schools, a long-term care residence, a daycare, and a block of low-rent housing, all of it south of Rue de la Paix. 138 of the houses were physically lifted and driven north. The rest were demolished and rebuilt. It started in June of 2008. Be precise about how the Malartic move was done, because the harsh version and the soft version are both wrong. There was no expropriation of the town and no referendum. Residents got a phone call offering a choice: move to a new house in the north, or sell, negotiated one household at a time. And the negotiations began before the project was authorized and before the public hearing sat, which residents told the Bureau made it feel settled in advance. One property held out. It belonged to Mary Elizabeth Wilczynski, whose son Ken Massey lived there and fought it. They refused $350,000. Quebec took the house by order in council under the Mining Act. The Superior Court dismissed their challenge in 2010, and the compensation was set in 2014 at $64,000. The heavier grievance came afterwards, and it is measured differently. Between January of 2011 and December of 2015, monitoring logged 4,193 hourly exceedances of the noise limit, day and night together. 40 decibels at night is a Quebec criterion from the project's own decree, not a World Health Organization guideline, though the two agree. Notices of non-compliance were issued systematically from 2011, and no penalty was ever imposed, which is a finding about the regulator as much as the company. Blasting is forbidden within 80 meters of Rue de la Paix, and blast mats are mandatory within 337 meters of a house. The Citizens Committee for the zone south of the railway filed a class action in August of 2016. It ended in a settlement approved in December of 2019. No money went to class members. What they got was a renovation program worth about $1.5 million and monitoring commitments. A settlement, not a judgment, no finding of liability. And the town keeps the lights on with it. A quarter to nearly a third of the municipal budget comes from mining taxes, and the last public headcount had over 1,000 employees and nearly 1,400 contractors on the site. 3 Anishinaabe nations told those same hearings, in 2009 and again in 2016, that the mine sat on their ancestral territory and was developed without regard for their rights. In June of 2020, 4 nations signed a collaboration agreement with the mine that runs through 2027. Both of those are true, and they happened 11 years apart. The pit beside the town was finished in 2023 and is now being filled with tailings. 642,612 ounces came out of that complex in 2025. Now tons, and not tons in the ground. Tons a year out the gate. Ischy James Bay in northern Quebec is the most active lithium ground in the country. The largest of the projects was renamed in July of 2024 to Saskatchewan, a Cree word that means climbing a hill and refers to 3 hills near the site. The name was recommended by elders of the Cree nation of Chisasibi and the Tallimans family. The resource is 108 million tons at 1.4% lithium oxide in the indicated category, which its owner calls the largest lithium pegmatite indicated resource in the Americas and the 8th largest on Earth. The feasibility study, published in October of 2025, sets the target at up to 800,000 tons a year of concentrate over 19 years. Lithium is in that rock for a reason that fits everything else here. It refuses to fit into the minerals that crystallize first, so it gets pushed into the last few percent of a cooling granite, and that fraction gets squeezed off into fractures as pegmatite. The deposit is the dregs of a magma body, injected into a crack and left alone ever since. Now, the agreements that decide whether any of that rock gets dug. Ischy has a working consent process, and it is old. The James Bay and Northern Quebec Agreement was signed on the 11th of November, 1975, and is Canada's first modern treaty. Chapter 22 created a review regime that still governs every project in the territory. The Pas de Brave followed in February of 2002. The Cree Nation has its own mining policy, which opposes uranium mining outright. Under that framework, 3 of the lithium projects have signed impact benefit agreements with the Crees. The Chinoochee Agreement at Whabouchi in 2014, the Pikutau Agreement at Rose in 2019, the Kapisakama Agreement at the Galaxy Project in December of 2023. And the biggest project does not have one. What it signed with Chisasibi on the 22nd of July 2026 is a non-binding letter of intent that states in its own text that it does not constitute consent, approval, or endorsement. So the accurate version is narrower than the Crees saying yes. EU-ISCHI has a treaty-based process that has produced 3 signed agreements over 12 years that is still running at the largest deposit and that the company cannot skip. Whether any of it gets built is a separate question. Battery-grade lithium carbonate averaged $63,700 a ton in 2022 and $9,000 in 2025. The Rose project has been fully permitted since 2023 and still has no construction decision. Rio Tinto slowed construction on its Quebec processing plant in March of 2026. 800,000 tons a year from a deposit that is the leftovers of a granite, if the price ever justifies it. The last unit is megawatts, and it is not a measure of rock at all. Everything so far has been about what the shield contains. The most valuable thing on it is not in the rock. It is the water running off the top, and the rock is the reason the water is worth anything. Look at how these dams are built. Churchill Falls in Labrador holds back 5,700 square kilometers of reservoir and more than 28 cubic kilometers of water, and it does it with 88 dikes totaling 64 kilometers. Not one great wall, 88 small ones. The James Bay project needed 215 dams and dikes for the same reason. That is what ancient flattened crust gives you. The relief is so low that a modest structure across a gap floods an enormous area, and the drainage is what geologists call deranged. A chaos of lakes and wetlands left by ice rather than an organized river system. The La Grande rises above 500 meters on the plateau. Diverting neighboring rivers into it roughly doubled the catchment and took the flow from about 1,700 cubic meters a second to 3,300. Put a national figure on it. In 2024, a drought year, hydro supplied around 55% of Canada's electricity, and Quebec alone generated just over half of every hydroelectric unit in the country. All of it started with a speech. Robert Bourassa announced the project on the 30th of April, 1971, in Quebec City, and his closing line was that it will not be said that we live poorly on land this rich. The Robert Bourassa station, named for him, carries 5,616 megawatts in 16 turbines, in a hall 137 meters underground. Hydro-Québec says no underground generating station anywhere produces more, and that is the operator's own wording. Its spillway is a staircase of 10 steps, each about 10 meters high and roughly the area of 2 football fields, dropping 110 meters and passing more than 15,000 cubic meters a second. The cost is documented by the utility itself. Flooding forest releases mercury from the drowned soil, bacteria convert it into methylmercury, and fish accumulate it. Concentrations in the La Grande reservoirs rose by a factor of between 2 and 8. A mercury agreement and a monitoring committee followed in 1986. By 2010, around 70% of Crees were eating local fish less than once a week, and that avoidance is the damage rather than the fix. Then there is Churchill Falls, which is the other kind of cost. 5,428 megawatts, 11 turbines, in a machine hall cut 300 meters into granite gneiss. First power in December of 1971. The contract that sells it was signed on the 12th of May, 1969, and runs 65 years from the in-service date, which is 2041. A 40-year term and an automatic 25-year renewal at a lower price. No escalation clause. The letter of intent had said renewal terms would be negotiated. The signed contract removed that. Newfoundland and Labrador's Royal Commission put the result plainly. For the 2 decades to the mid-90s, Hydro-Québec took about 96% of the benefit. The owner of the resource took about 4%. Across the 50 years to 2019, the figures cited in the Innu claim put the split at around $28 billion, against about 2. Newfoundland went to the Supreme Court 3 times and lost 3 times, in 1984, in 1988, and again in 2018. That last time, the court held 7-1 that Quebec civil law contains no doctrine allowing a contract to be reopened because the world changed. Two things about that river are still unresolved, and both matter. The land is Nitassinan, and the Labrador Innu were not parties to any of it. The Innu Nation filed a $4 billion claim in 2020, a reconciliation agreement in principle offering $87 million over 16 years, plus 3% of the operating company's dividends, was reached in June of 2025. The ratification results came on the 28th of October. Nachwashish cleared the turnout threshold. Sheshachu fell short of it by about 10 votes, and the agreement failed. A revised version went back for a vote in 2026 and was postponed. As I write this, there is no ratified settlement with the Innu. And on the 17th of August, 2026, 5 days before I wrote this line, Newfoundland and Labrador, Quebec, and Canada announced an agreement to tear up the 1969 contract and build Gull Island. $49 billion in present value to Newfoundland, against $36 billion in the version the previous government negotiated. It is not signed. The binding agreements do not exist yet. The framework lapses in March of 2027 if nothing is concluded, and Quebec votes on the 5th of October. 5,428 megawatts on a river whose price has been argued about for longer than most of the people arguing have been alive. So look at what is actually on that list of deposits. A magma conduit that clogged, a basin of brine circulating for tens of millions of years, a pipe fired up from 200 kilometers down fast enough to arrive in a day, a mountain range wringing fluid up a fault, one earthquake at a time, the last few percent of a granite squeezed into a crack. Those five have nothing to do with each other. They are separated by roughly 2.5 billion years of shield history, and they share no mechanism. What they share is an address. The Canadian shield is not valuable because it is old. Old is a side effect. It is valuable because it is the kind of crust that never got taken back. Most of this planet's surface has been dragged down, remelted, and returned to the mantle, and everything written in it was erased. This crust was not, so every violent thing that ever happened here is still legible. The wealth in that rock is less a resource than a record of damage that nothing deleted, which is why the last item on that list does not belong with the others. The water is the only thing here that is not a catastrophe. Its value comes from the opposite direction. The rock is hard, flat, and finished, and a river will sit still against it. Two prospectors looking for diamonds in Labrador came back with nickel. Almost nothing up there was found on purpose. And there is a hole in the middle of all that rock, filled with salt water and called Hudson Bay. That video is up next.